Okay, welcome. Today we plan to visit Sardis, today and next week actually, because Sardis is one of the most interesting and most visual sites in Western Turkey, or Anatolia as we say. Perhaps another one of those situations where the modern city moved, and so the ancient city is more accessible to us, and so it's fun to visit it and to relive a whole lot of very interesting history, including some biblical history. So let me pull those slides up for you, and we are off to ancient Sardis, the westernmost edge of the Persian Empire. Okay, so we were in Ephesus not so long ago, and then up to Pergamum, and here is Sardis. Sardis is, as you can see, part of the Roman province of Asia Minor. Prior to that, Sardis was the capital city of the Empire of Lydia, which included this section of property right here. Thyatira was also part of the historic kingdom of Lydia. And I'll try to remember to say more about that next week. But for now, we're going to think about Sardis and the fact that it was the western terminus of the great royal road that Darius the Great had built all the way across his empire. And so let's see if we can't do that for you. There's the Persian Empire for you, all the way from Greece. Never conquered Greece entirely, but it conquered Thrace, northern Greece, all the way across Asia Minor, all of Egypt, all the way across Asia, what we call Iraq, Iran, all the way to the Indus River. So Darius the Great, about 590 BC, he's the guy who faced off with the Athenians at Marathon in 490 BC, and about that did not go well for him, as you recall. But somewhere about that time, he also built himself a royal road all the way from Susa, the capital of the Persian Empire, all the way to Sardis, the westernmost edge of it's the capital city of the westernmost satrapy of the Persian Empire. About 1,677 miles long, that Persian Royal Road. 111 stations along the way, which works out to a station about every 15 miles. The purpose of it was that he could get news back and forth from the western edges of his empire back to the Susa in a sort of a timely manner. Herodotus, the Greek historian, tells us that Darius's horsemen could make that trip in about 9 days. I've done the math. You have to be really moving to do that. There were 111 stations, and that's about 15 miles from one station to another. And you would have to trade horses every station. Run flat out for 15 miles, trade horses, run flat out for another 15. The similar comparison, of course, is our own Pony Express, 1860 to 1861, and they did change horses every 10 or 15 miles. Our Pony Express, of course, ended in the fall of 1861, basically replaced by the telegraph system. But Darius had this for a purpose, and the purpose was for communication, and he had his couriers running back and forth on a regular basis. And this is where we get the famous quote from Herodotus, the Greek historian: "There is nothing in the world that travels faster than these Persian couriers. Neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds." And if that sounds familiar to you, it's because it's engraved on the James Farley Post Office in New York City. So that's where that comes from. So that was that Persian Royal Road, and as I say, ending in Sardis. Sardis kind of the capital city then of that westernmost satrapy. Interesting too that in the time of Queen Esther, when Xerxes, or Ahasuerus, as he's known in the Hebrew Bible, sent out that decree about the Jews being able to defend themselves, that decree would have been read in downtown Sardis, just because that is where the westernmost satrapy had its anchor. And that's the road right there. And this is downtown Sardis, and that is the remnants of that great Persian royal road, the western, as I say, terminus. This is downtown Sardis. We'll be back here next week, but for now we're going to go out into the country because there's some phenomenally interesting stuff out in the country in Sardis. We are driving here alongside the river, the Pactolus River. Pactolus River, you can't quite see it. It is right there. Pactolus River, and about 570 BC, gold was discovered in the Pactolus River. That was during the time of Aliates, King Aliates, father of Croesus. By the time of Croesus, now you can see a little bit more clearly there, the working shops. You could just begin to see the shops here on a sunnier day. You can see them better. These were the shops where the gold from the river was processed. Originally came out as electrum, which is a naturally occurring alloy of gold and silver. And these were the first people here in Sardis, during the time of Aliates and Croesus, his son, the first people to actually make coins, to mint coins. They were originally electrum, so then the value varied because the percentage of gold versus silver varied, of course, in naturally occurring electrum. Eventually they figured out in these shops here how to leach out the silver and have pure gold, which was a much more consistent value. And so the very first coins in the world minted right here in Sardis. And if you recognize the name Croesus, you may have heard the expression, so-and-so is wealthy as Croesus. That's him, and it's because of the gold in the river about 500 BC, and that was the source of that wealth. We're a little farther out in the country now, coming up on the Temple of Artemis with the citadel in the background, and a very large, interesting temple, about 500 BC. As you get closer, you notice these two pillars. Notice one slightly askew, and notice the dark line here with the citadel or Acropolis in the background. Just to give a sense of the size of those pillars, you will also notice that the bases are nicely finished, but the columns are not fluted. So this large, massive temple was never actually fully completed. Temple to Artemis, who the Romans called Diana, but this is the same Artemis from Ephesus, but never entirely completed. I think personally, they overextended a bit when they planned the temple. So they did finish parts of it, but not completely the outer pillars. Fun little shot from Sir William Ramsay around 1900 is here. You can see that pillar capital slightly askew, the citadel in the background, and notice the dirt level. Nothing showing of that temple except these two pillars. And there's another shot toward the citadel, and you can see those two distinctive pillars. Now you know where the dirt level was. It was about here until this was excavated in the early 20th century. You can see some of the columns were completed. They had their fluting done, but several of them did not. Now we're going to go up this hill and give you some pictures back toward the citadel. But maybe we should talk a little bit more about the citadel first. This was the original location of the city of Sardis, much more defensible, of course, than things on the plain. Even after the city grew, and much of the city was in the plain, in the valley, still the royal and military defense place was up here with a wall around it, very defensible. Now, the interesting thing about that is we have historical records that when the Persians were invading this area and the locals were defending, the Persians actually succeeded in taking that citadel. And the way that it happened was that one of the soldiers on top, it was apparently a hot summer night, and his head got a little warm, so he took his helmet off, put it on the wall to let his head cool, bumped the helmet with his elbow or something, and so, needless to say, the helmet came bouncing down the side of the hill. The Persians, not being stupid, were watching carefully, and they said to themselves, they watched the soldier then come down, and pick up his helmet and walk back up. And they said to them, there's got to be a path there. We just have to find it. So they waited till everybody fell asleep again on top of the citadel, snuck up that path and took the citadel. And it's often been suggested that it was that moment in the history of Sardis that Jesus had in mind when he spoke to the church at Sardis, Revelation chapter 3, be watchful, and strengthen the things that remain. If you are not watchful, I will come as a thief, and you shall not know what hour I will come upon thee. It does seem like it overlaps nicely with that story, although this is not exactly distinctive. Jesus tended to say this on quite often occasions. Be watchful, be alert, be watching and praying. But it does tie in with the history of Sardis in kind of an interesting way. So we are now standing here looking at that citadel. We're going to go up this little hill now so you can get a view back toward this classical temple of Artemis built around 500 BC. And here we are up that hill toward the citadel, and you can see again those two pillars that have been standing there for ever since 500 BC, so that's 2,500 years. One top slightly askew. These fell over the years, the upper parts fell, but you can also see this is about where the dirt layer was when the archaeologists first began to dig here in the early and mid 20th century. Also get a sense of size. Those are people there, and those are the columns. It's a massive temple, massive columns, but as I said, apparently kind of an overreach because they never entirely finished it. You can also see structure here, which is very interesting, and I think the next slide will be even more clear. There it is. Byzantine era church. By Byzantine era, I mean about 350, 450 AD, and the Byzantine Christians, by this time Christianity was the dominant religion here, and the Byzantine Christians came out, and right kind of in the corner of this Artemis temple, they built a beautiful little church. They did not overextend, as you can see. They just sort of claiming this site for the Lord, and it's very interesting to be able to see the layers of history here at Sardis. And next week, well, we'll drop the screens here a minute. Okay. Next week we'll go back to Sardis and take you to the downtown area and try to remember also to talk a little bit about Lydia that we met in Philippi so long ago. So, okay, well, thanks for joining us, and we are going to close down here and send this out.